I mean, not little rocks. These are big rocks. I mean, a person couldn't throw a rock that far. And this is a rock comes rolling out of the trees at my feet. And I'm going, whatever this son of a gun is throwing boulders at me. So at this time, I seen this throwing boulders at me. And I don't see it giving any chase. So I just turn, I grab my rifle, and I go running. And I hope that when I get down there, my friend is waiting for me down there in that pickup. And he hadn't hauled ass to town, which is what I'm afraid. So I'm running down there, and I never been so happy to see a blue pickup in my whole life. That old blue pickup was sitting there running. He was sitting there. And I didn't waste any time, man. I just kept running down there, and I grabbed my gun, and I jumped in that thing. And I don't even know if we even spoke leaving that thing, man. It was like, now he didn't see, he didn't see as much as I did, I sat there, this thing kept, when he took off, it hadn't quite got to that last tree to where you could get a good look at his shoulders and arms like I did. So his story is a little bit different than mine, but my story, I seen that thing moving from side to side, and it was several years later. There's a movie came out called Gorillas in the Mist, and there's one of them big silverback gorillas was moving its head from side to side, hiding behind a tree, and it sent cold chills in my back because that gorilla was doing the same thing I saw this thing doing. Like it was looking around that tree with its right eye, and then it would go to the left side of the tree and look around with its left eye, and I was like, whatever this thing, it was very gorilla-like. And I was at a little paranormal conference down here in Granbury, Texas, and I wish I could remember the guy's name. He's a Texas Bigfoot hunter. You've heard of him. He wears that big leather hat. He's on TV a lot. And I told him the story, and he found me later and called me over, and he showed me a picture. He said because what happened, I tried to get my buddy to go. I really wanted to go back to this area. And I wanted to get a bigger gun and go back. My friend, he didn't want no part of it. He didn't want to go down there. But I wasn't about to go down there by myself. So it took me about 3 or 4 days to finally convince him that let's get some deer rifles and go back down here and do some further investigating of what this thing is. And if we confront it again, maybe things would be a little different. So 4 days later, we went back down there, and we had deer rifles this time instead of 22s. And I went down there, and I found this branch that this thing had tore off. And we looked for tracks, but this old ground was so hard-baked that it wouldn't hardly leave a track. It wouldn't leave much of a track anyway. It's just hard-baked by this Texas sun down here. It was so hard-baked it wasn't going to leave any kind of a track. I didn't really get the kind of tracks I had hoped to find. We went over to where the branch was tore off, and there was a branch. It was a huge branch tore off a mesquite tree. Now, these mesquite trees are tough. You ever tried to tear a small branch off one, you know how much strength it takes just to pull a small branch off. Well, this thing had pulled a huge branch off this mesquite tree, and then it had taken that mesquite limb, and it had twisted the smaller limbs around it like a baseball bat that was probably 6 feet long. And so I was like, whatever did this, just took that limb and just twisted it and just stripped that limb, the smaller limb, to the point where there wasn't any thorns or leaves or nothing on it. It was just a vine wrapped around the big stem of the branch. And anyway, so I went down this paranormal, and I told that Bigfoot hunter about that, and he found me later, and he showed me a picture. He said, did that branch you found that it tore off, did it look like this? And he had a picture that looked just like it. There's something that tore a branch off and it twisted the vine around it. And I said, yeah. I said, that almost looks like exactly the same branch that was laying there. And he said, well, he got this off another case. And he said, it seems to be something they do, they like they said. But while we were there, I said, well, we didn't. I went up in the trees where we heard the first roar, and there was a hill there, and there was a rock that was kind of buried in the hill, and it was kind of an undercut underneath it, like it was almost, it wasn't a cave, but it was kind of like a overhang. And I had looked in there, and this thing was stacked with mesquite branches, dried mesquite branches, and all the thorns had been taken off. It's like meticulously taken off. You couldn't find a thorn on any of that stuff. It was like something had took the time to pick every thorn off every branch, and then had just stacked them in there, and it would almost made like a nice bed up underneath this rock overhang that something had made in there. And I was like, there's no way running water or anything like that could have washed all them branches up in there. It's almost like whatever this thing was had made it a nice little bed up underneath there. And like it was probably just going to hang out there and eat some frogs for a while. So. But we were like just amazed at this thing, that we encountered this thing. My friends to this day, Eve don't much talk about it. I told the story for a long time, and nobody gave me the time of day or believe it or anything, So it was years had went by, and I just stopped telling it. Nobody believed it. Yeah, nobody would believe anything you said back then. It was like, well, you got no proof, you got no pictures, you got no dead carcass, you got, And so I just quit telling the story. But I'm a UFO experiencer, and I was at the Roswell UFO Festival, and I found a couple of other people there, and I thought that is pretty cool, to sit here with another UFO experiencer, alien experiencer, be in the same room with them. Because it's pretty rare for that to happen. Then to get to actually spend time with some of these people. Well, I don't know what had happened, but somehow or another Bigfoot had come in the conversation. And I said, well, actually, I'm one of those guys. I've seen a Bigfoot. Not only did I see a UFO, not only did I encounter an alien, at one point in my life I did see a Bigfoot. I saw the Bigfoot way before I ever seen my first UFO. Years before I ever seen my first UFO, I had that Bigfoot experience. And then the other two people said they're UFO experiencers. They had Bigfoot sightings as well. And I thought, man, both of you, how rare is it that someone sees a UFO? How rare is it that someone that's seen a UFO actually sees a Bigfoot? And how rare that three of such people would end up in the same room and having a conversation? So I'm like, there's got to be more to this than just coincidence. And so we're sitting there talking to these people, and I'm like realizing, well, on a show called Monster Castle Paranormal show, Wolfman Mike is a buddy of mine, and he had a guy on there. He told me, he said, man, you got to hear this new guy, this guy named Bruce May. This guy named Bruce May. He's an Anunnaki. And he claims to be an Anunnaki, like, I don't know. It was like they had cloned somebody that was Anunnaki, and they said when he was a kid, his parents had to literally cut the tips off his ears so he'd appear normal. And this guy, he said when he turned 7 years old, he had total recall of all the different lives he had lived and different planets he had lived on. And part of his experience was, he said that in his home planet, the Anunnaki had rescued a bunch of the gray aliens that people see all the time, and they had allowed them to live on their planet, and they had chosen to live underground where they wouldn't bother anybody, and they had cities and stuff underground, and supposedly everybody had got along great, and they said they completely trusted them, helped them every way in the world they could. And he said, out of the blue, one day, he said the ground erupted, and these huge shafts came sticking up out of the ground, and just thousands and thousands of these gray aliens came pouring out, and they had weapons, and they just declared war on them and took over their planet. He said, but not only were the little gray aliens with these powerful weapons, he said they had these big feet, these Bigfoot creatures that came up, and they were the muscle to the Greys. He said they worked together, they're part of the same bunch, and he said there was just this thousands and thousands of little gray aliens with guns, and these thousands and thousands of these Bigfoots that are monstrously strong and fast, and they're declaring war on this peaceful civilization. And they said they abandoned the planet and they nuked it to kill everyone. And he said this planet's Mercury. He said that was her home, and it was like, man, it'd be pretty cool to see, to go explore Mercury at some point and see if we can find any evidence of something happening like this over there. But he said they destroyed the whole planet, was what Bruce May's story was, and he talked about how the Bigfoot and the Greys were in it together, and they lived in the underground. And a lot of times I just wonder, if that ain't the true story, how these people that have seen UFOs have also encountered Bigfoot. So I think that to some degree that would explain some of this. And I find it quite amazing that, that he told this story. And, but I mean, it scared that whole sighting, this whole area was just lit up, and now, I talk to the people nowadays, they don't know anything about it. They don't have anything. I want to, just to kind of give you, I want to read another article here, and this is from, let me see if I can get a better look here. This is from Tuesday, July 21st, 1964. This comes from the Abilene Reporter News. It says Caddo was ablaze last Monday night. Several residents of this former boomtown sat on their doorsteps with guns, awaiting the appearance of the critter. The critter, described by several as 7 feet tall and ape-like, failed to show up this time. Among those who sat up were Charlie Gaunt, who saw the monstrosity both Saturday and Sunday night and fired 10 shots at it. 2 new points became evident Tuesday as cattle citizens congregated at the general store and filling station to talk about the critter or ape. The people in East Stevens County were generally concerned, if not scared. Area residents began seeing the critter approximately 2 weeks before they became worried enough to report the mysterious marauder. Joe Roberts, Reporter News correspondent who visited Caddo Monday night, said that every yard was lit up with outside lights and that the populace is armed. They were setting up last night to shoot whatever it was, Miss Roberts said. No one was roaming about at night, though it's somewhat dangerous, she said. People stay on their own property. If it's a prank, it's a highly dangerous one. Someone could get killed, Miss Roberts said. Deputy Sheriff Edgar Martin, who patrolled the area Monday night with the game warden, said no doubt that they're seeing something, but we don't know what it is. The theory that the critter is an ape escaped from Possum Kingdom Lake Game Preserve has been discounted by the game caretaker there. He said he had no recollection of such an animal ever being there. A few people also have voiced that throughout that it might be a bear, but no one seems to know. One factor has been noted about the critter's wanderings. It has been sighted as early as the day as 2:30 p.m. and in the hours of the darkness at 2 a.m. So you can imagine, and back then people don't just make up stuff. They're not just going to make up something like that and be criticized for it. Back then your word meant something. You could be denied a loan based upon the public's opinion of you, So you're not just going to make up a wild story like that, and especially not an old rancher like Charlie Gant. This is old guy. This old guy, he was dead serious about what he had seen. He had got a good look at it, and he had shot at it several times. And he's not the kind of guy that just shoot anything crawling around. And what'd be crawling around in his house out in the middle of nowhere and throwing rocks at his house and harassing the dogs. And it wasn't the only place, There was I think there was 70 miles from here. There was other sightings. There was one over by Holly, Texas, where there was a couple of boys working over there, and they something threw rocks at the boys, and it hit the boys with rocks, and then they saw it come out of the woods, and they come out of the woods roaring at them and throwing rocks at them, and they took off, and it took off, and this was like 70 miles away, So and then down at Coleman, Texas, I think Teresa shared a story here the other day about there's a woman down at Coleman that said that said the blacks had gotten off in her garden. They lived way out in the middle of the country, and the blacks had went out there and stole vegetables out of her garden. She watched them from her kitchen window.